She moved through the house like she belonged to it. But lately I started wondering if the house ever truly belonged to her. There was a distance that wasn't there before. Something in the way she looked at me like she was seeing through me, or worse, around me. I told myself it was work. Stress. People drift when life crowds in. But it wasn't that. It was the pause before she spoke, the moments where her fingers hovered over the same object for too long, as if caught in a memory I wasn't part of. I began to catalog the silences between us, not just when she wasn't speaking, but when she was holding something back. Love had once been easy with her. Now I was reading too deeply into every glance, every sigh, every sentence that ended too soon. I tried to shake it. I told myself I was imagining it. But when you live with someone long enough, you know when something isn't right, and what lived in her eyes lately wasn't confusion or sadness, it was guilt. She started locking the bathroom door. It sounds small, insignificant. But she never used to, she never had reason to. I'd walk past and hear the water running, and sometimes she'd just be standing there, fully dressed, staring at herself in the mirror. She didn't know I noticed. I never said anything. One night, I found a shirt of hers folded inside a bag at the back of her closet. Not strange by itself, except I didn't recognize the shirt. It wasn't one she ever wore around me. It smelled faintly of cologne, a kind I didn't use. That night, I lay in bed beside her and counted the space between us like miles. She turned her back to me. I reached for her anyway. She didn't pull away, but she didn't return the touch either. Just lay there, breathing slow and even, like she was somewhere else entirely. I stared at the ceiling and tried to remember the last time she looked at me like I was her home. She began leaving earlier in the mornings. No kiss goodbye, no warmth in her voice. Just the soft shuffle of her keys, and the front door closing behind her. I followed her once. I'm not proud of it, but suspicion is a corrosive thing. It eats at you slowly until trust turns to rust. She didn't go to work. She drove across town to a residential area I didn't recognize. Parked in front of a modest house, with an overgrown lawn and curtains drawn tight. She sat in the car for a long time before going in. She had a key. She let herself in like she belonged there. I waited. Hours passed. My chest ached with each one. When she came out, she looked calm, peaceful, like I hadn't seen her in weeks. I drove home ahead of her, got into bed, pretended to be asleep. When she slipped under the covers beside me, she exhaled like she'd returned from a long journey. I wanted to ask her where she had been, but fear held my tongue. One day while she was showering, I searched her purse. My hands shook the entire time. I hated what I was doing, hated the man I was becoming, but I couldn't stop. I found a receipt from a pharmacy on the other side of the city. I drove there the next day, walked in pretending I was picking up for her. The clerk asked me to confirm a birth date. I gave hers. It didn't match. The name on the account was different. I asked to see the receipt again. The clerk hesitated, but handed it over. The name wasn't hers, but the handwriting on the note attached was. It was a message, same dosage, no changes, thank you. The handwriting matched the way she wrote me notes, grocery lists, reminders. I knew it was hers. She had a second identity, a second life, and I didn't know what it meant. I didn't sleep that night. I watched her move in the kitchen, hum to herself, like nothing had changed, but everything had. I confronted her the next morning. Not directly, just asked if everything was okay, if she was feeling well. She smiled too quickly. Said she was fine. That word again. Fine. The word people use when the truth would burn too much. I didn't press. I couldn't. Instead, I began my own quiet investigation. I checked the mail before she could. I kept track of her car's mileage. I watched her while pretending to read the paper. She had tells, subtle ones. The way her hands trembled when she poured coffee. The way she avoided my eyes when I mentioned love. One evening I followed her again. This time she went to a storage unit. She punched in the code without hesitation. I waited until she left, then approached the door. Tried the same code. It worked. Inside were boxes, dozens of them. I opened one and found photos, journals, clothes that didn't belong to her current life, items for a child. I didn't understand. None of it made sense. But the further I dug, the more I knew she had a life I never knew about. She came home that night and kissed me like she always had. Soft, automatic. But her eyes darted. She could sense a shift. I said nothing. I was terrified of the answers I might receive. Over the next few days I read the journals. They were dated before we met. Pages filled with grief, confusion, love, mentions of a child. A boy. There were hospital records, birth certificates, and then death certificates. 2 names, the child's and a man's, both gone. Her family, a family I never knew existed. A chapter in her life erased. She had buried them. Not just physically. Emotionally. She had recreated herself from the ashes of loss. I understood now. The other house, the other name, the second self. It was her sanctuary, a monument to what once was. She was grieving still, long after the world moved on. I held the journal to my chest and wept for her, for all the years we shared where I thought I knew her completely. I didn't tell her what I had found. Not right away. I didn't want to break her again. But my silence turned to weight. It strained us. One night, over dinner, she looked at me and said, "You don't look at me the same anymore." I asked her what she meant. She said, "You look at me like I'm going to vanish." I wanted to say, "I found your past." I wanted to ask why she never trusted me with it. But instead I reached across the table, took her hand and said, "I love you." It was both a promise and a plea. Her eyes filled with tears. She squeezed my hand back, but said nothing. That silence spoke louder than words. She wasn't ready. Maybe she never would be. But I had seen her secret. And I didn't run. Weeks passed. She began to change again. Lighter, free. I wondered if she could feel the truth in me, if somehow she knew I knew. And maybe that knowing, that unspoken understanding, gave her permission to let go. She smiled more. She hummed in the shower again. And one day she took my hand and said, "There's something I need to show you." I followed her in silence. She drove to the other house, the one I'd already seen. She unlocked the door and let me inside. I walked the room slowly, pretending I didn't know what waited behind each. She opened the closet, pulled out a small box, handed it to me. "He was 5, she said. And he loved stars." Her voice cracked. "His father died 6 months later." I didn't think I'd survive. I set the box down, held her. We stood there in the quiet, surrounded by memory, and I felt her breath slow deepen. For the first time she was letting me in. We sat on the floor for hours. She told me about her son. About the man she once loved. About how she had to rebuild herself after losing them. "I couldn't be her anymore," she said. "I had to become someone else, or I wouldn't have made it." She looked at me, eyes shining with both fear and hope. "But I've never stopped feeling like I'm lying to you." I took her hand. "You're not," I said. "You survived." And I meant it. The love I felt for her only deepened. Because now I saw all of her. The cracks, the sorrow, the strength. She had lived through fire, and even though she was scarred, she had loved me through it all. That night we went home together. Not just to the house we shared, but to each other. Truly, fully. In the weeks that followed we found a new rhythm. She didn't hide anymore. She brought home the photos. She let me read the journals. And I asked questions. Not because I needed to know every detail, but because I wanted her to feel safe sharing them. We built something stronger from the broken pieces. Some nights I still wake to find her staring out the window. But now, she reaches for me. Pulley,